This is welcome to our webinar regarding batch tagging and camp updates. This is a joint production of Jacoby Law and Emerge Law Group. If you don't know, I am Kevin Jacoby, owner of Jacoby Law, and my beautiful and talented co-host today is Alex Berger, a shareholder at Emerge. Welcome, Alex. All right. So today, as the title suggests, we're going to be covering two issues that are new this year to OLCC recreational marijuana licensees and applicants. That particularly is batch tagging and OLCC's transition to their new licensing system known as CAMP. I'm going to start our discussion with batch tagging and then turn it over to Alex to discuss the transition to CAMP and related licensing and application issues. Everybody, please feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, and feel free to interrupt us. We will try to respond to them as they're posted. All right, so starting with batch tagging. I first want to give our attendees here the lay of the land of plant tagging and how we got here. So at the beginning of Oregon's recreational marijuana system back in 2015, OLCC was tasked by the legislature with developing a cannabis tracking system. Purpose of that system is to ensure compliance and safety, as well as track the handling and selling of marijuana products. In 2015, OLCC contracted with Franwell to develop the system that would become Metrc, which we all know. At that time, Franwell had already developed a similar cannabis tracking system in previously legalized states, Colorado and Washington. OLCC's contract with Franwell and Metrc was for an initial term of 5 years, which could be renewed for an additional 5 years. We're currently in the last year of that renewal term, and notably, I think it was last year, may have been late the year before, OLCC announced that they were looking at the possibility of replacing Metrc under a new contract. So that could be in the works as well. In any event, as part of OLCC's rules, as from the beginning, OLCC has required that every growing marijuana plant be individually tagged as soon as it reaches 36 inches in height or begins to exhibit secondary sex characteristics, which is starting to form buds or pistils, whichever is earlier. Immature plants under 36 inches are not required to be individually tagged, but were required to be tracked in batches in Metrc. Those are, I believe they're referred to as cultivation batches or immature cultivation batches in Metrc. Under the previous rules, immature plants were to be tracked in cultivation batches of up to 100 individual plants, typically tracked by reference to their strain name and other information, usually the date of propagation, to enable them to be traced either to a seed batch or a mother plant if the immatures are clones. Once the plants grow to a point where they are required to be tagged, the tags remain associated with the plants through the rest of the plant's life cycle until they're harvested. And after the harvest, the resulting product is tagged with package tags. So the idea is once the harvest happens, the plants remain with their plant tags until the products are dried and cured and then bucked from the plant, at which point they are sorted into package tags. So for producers, the requirement of individual tagging of plants quickly proved to be costly. Sorry. So individual plant tags come at a cost of 45 cents per tag. For any any marijuana producer of any particular size, you're looking at thousands of tags at 45 cents a pop. This is typically upwards of an out-of-pocket cost of 5,000 or more for a modest outdoor grow, and that's per crop. Um, the the tags have to be purchased from Metrc, from the producer's Metrc account, and can only be paid for via credit or debit card. This presents an issue for a majority of licensees who are unbanked, um, which means they either have to use their personal cards or those of their employees, who then get reimbursed in cash. Um, and I have been I will warn people that OLCC has recently taken the position that is likely going to result in a final order soon, that that a person who orders or who is involved in the payment um, of ordering and purchasing plant tags are necessarily licensee representatives while they're doing that. So be careful who you have order plant tags for you and package tags. So for plant tagging, there's also a hard cost in terms of the labor necessary to affix a tag to each individual growing plant. Um, I talked with one producer who ran these numbers down recently. They found that it takes roughly 8 labor hours to tag about 1,200 plants. And what the industry has been saying from nearly the beginning of Oregon's recreational marijuana system is that the cost of individual plant tagging far outweighs any regulatory benefit. Uh, Notably, there's the statute that requires the cannabis tracking system does not require itself individual tagging of plants. OLCC's stated justification for requiring individual tagging at the time boiled down to basically it's a Schedule 1 controlled substance, so we need to know if a plant is legal or illegal, just based on a visual inspection. So that, as we all know, if you're that justification is very quickly going to fall by the wayside with the rescheduling to Schedule 3. But besides that, there's also no public safety benefit to individual tagging of plants because uh, the batching that happens after the harvest makes it practically impossible to trace a particular batch of marijuana to an individual plant. You're only going to be able to trace it back to the harvest batch. Um, uh, this one producer I know, and he's here, Mike Getlin of Old Apple Farms and I think it was in 21 or 2022, invited then executive director Steve Marks out to his farm to kind of demonstrate the labor that goes into individual plant tagging. And in that, I think that was pretty successful lobbying effort by Mike there, because I think he gave up after an hour of backbreaking monotonous labor and ended up only tagging 71 plants. So after that, he Steve Marks instructed OLCC staff to start looking into the concept of batch tagging and taking it seriously. So so that was a win for the industry, right? In November of 2022, OLCC published its first proposed batch tagging rule, which was later finalized as a permanent rule in March of 2023, so just over a year ago. and had a stated effective date of January 1st of this year. The language of the originally promulgated rule did not require any particular new functionality in the metric system. It was assumed that the 100 plant cultivation batches for immature plants would just continue throughout the life cycle with a single 45-cent tag being attached to the outermost portion of the batch once it reached 36 inches. However, at the end of last year, December 15th, 2023, just about 2 weeks before the batch tagging rule was going to go into effect, OLCC announced that they would be temporarily amending the rule to delay it until April 22nd of this year. Their justification was a, quote, contract procurement process with Metrc that had not been completed. And I'll point out that Metrc's contract with OLCC specifically allows OLCC to amend its rules in ways that might affect them. But what's apparent is that Metrc pushed back on this batch tagging amendment because it wanted to maintain its revenue. And we know this because of what OLCC went on to announce later this year. So on fast forward to February 27th of this year, OLCC announced another delay in the implementation of batch tagging, this time pushing it out to June 17th. We are now on the cusp of that go live date in a few weeks. Last month, OLCC issued an informational bulletin regarding batch tagging, which I will have Tone and Zine post to the chat here momentarily. But the highlights of that informational bulletin is that the maximum number of plants per tag is 100. To qualify for batch tagging, the plants have to be the same strain. They have to be grouped together in the same contiguous growing area. They have to be physically separated and demarcated from other plant batches. And the tag must be affixed to the outermost plant in the batch, which I take to mean nearest to wherever the walkway is, the normal walkway is in the growing area, so that the batch can be visually confirmed to have a tag. Now, the rule itself does not define, and the guidance doesn't go into any detail as to what they mean by what it means for a batch to be physically separated and demarcated. But I would imagine that some amount of space between the batches, or ropes, or twine, or netting, or some other indicators of where one batch ends and another begins will likely satisfy this rule. But you're probably going to want to talk with your local inspectors about to get their take on that, because as we know, every inspector has a different interpretation. So beginning 3 days ago, I believe Metrc began selling their batch tags for plant quantities of 1, 5, 25, 50, and 100 plants with a cost of 45 cents times the maximum number of plants available for the tags. So thus, for example, a 100 plant batch tag will cost the exact same amount as 100 individual plant tags. So this is so that essentially wipes away the cost, the cost outlay benefit for batch tagging. So and in fact, in many circumstances, it's going to increase the cost somewhat. And you can see proof of that from OLCC's example in their informational bulletin. They say, for example, if you have a cultivation batch of 77 plants, you can tag them with 100 plant tag. But if you do that, you'd be overpaying for that tag to the tune of $14.85. If you want to save that $15, you can purchase a 50 plant tag, a 25 plant tag, and 2 single plant tags. But remember, when you do that, you have to physically separate your 77 plant batch into 4 separate areas. So you're quickly losing any benefit from the cost savings, even the labor cost savings. Of course, you can continue to individually tag your plants. And many people I've talked to are still going to do that. While there is no limit on the number of plant batches you can have at your premises, please remember that you'll still be limited to your canopy areas as to where you can locate your plants. And keep in mind that if you're using space in order to demarcate one batch from another, you're going to quickly lose canopy area. So for outdoor producers specifically, there's some relief on the individual plant tagging rule prior to and after June 17th. If you have plants that have reached, this is in the OLCC's informational bulletin, if you have plants that have reached 36 inches but aren't flowering yet, they will not need to be tagged at all until June 17th. However, if they start to flower before June 17th, you will have to individually tag them. So you get some relief, but also not much. Oh, sorry. And Wendy, thank you, Wendy, has corrected me. There's no option for 25. So for a 25 plant batch tag, apparently OLCC's guidance was incorrect in that on that front. Thank you, Wendy. So back to outdoor producers, because of the requirement to individually tag if your plants start to flower or before June 17th. That means that outdoor producers are going to still need to have a supply of individual plant tags for this season. So that practically speaking, that wipes away the benefits of batch tagging for this year for outdoor producers, unless you feel very certain based on your life cycle and what inputs, unless you feel very, very certain that they're not going to flower before June 17th. And remember, flowering means any evidence of secondary sex characteristics. So buds forming, any kind of pistils, is when the tagging requirement goes into effect. So with all of this, is there any benefit to batch tagging? Like I said, many producers I've spoken to have said no. They point to the additional labor and metric input required for batch tagging. So any labor costs that they save from moving away from individually tagging will likely be eclipsed by the labor necessary to physically demarcate each batch, in addition to labor costs for staff to learn how to set up these cultivation batches in Metrc and tracking the new tags. An additional thing, and I don't know if people have received any of the new batch tags yet. And yes, plants are considered flowering until there's a 2 centimeter wide tip from the tip of the pistil to the from pistil to pistil, so 2 centimeters. Thank you for clarifying that. So I don't know if anybody has seen any of these batch tags, but at least there was a worry that that the new batch tags may look the same as an individual tag. So there could be a risk, which would make the risk of mixing up a 100 plant batch tag with an individual tag likely, and then then you're looking at multiple levels of cost redundancy that you wouldn't otherwise have. And also for many producers whose staff is used to individual tagging and have developed efficiencies in the process over the years, it probably makes more sense to continue individually tagging rather than investing in new processing. Okay, and Wendy from Can Experts is clarifying that the batch tags will be in different colors, although it's not confirmed yet. So we'll see. I guess I hope so too. So again, going back to, many producers already have their processes in place for individual tagging. You've already wrested out as much savings from that. You've gotten efficient with it. Moving to a new system now might not make sense. So because there's gonna be more cost in learning a new system, especially in a relatively short period of time. So it probably makes more sense to continue individually tagging for most people rather than investing in that new process that may not result in any measurable cost savings. So yes, Christine, I share your sentiment that there has been there's been a bit of a bait and switch here. So the final point, I get a lot of questions about is there anything that can be done to fix this? Unfortunately, not immediately. I think the bait and switch occurred as a result of the change in leadership at OLCC that we saw earlier this year. I think many would say that had Steve Marks remained at the helm, that we probably wouldn't have seen these changes, these delays in implementation and the allowance for a Metrc to continue to wrest the same amount of revenue from the industry. But it's okay, and thank you for that clarification. So if plants start flowering on June 1st, they likely will be able to wait until June 17th because the 2 centimeter pistil growth will not have been reached. I will caution you, though, that a lot goes into rates of growth that are outside of producers' control, the amount of sun, the amount of rain, the variations in nutrients. So if you get inspected, which I think we can expect under the current OLCC environment, if you get inspected on June 17th or June 18th, and the investigator believes them to be flowering, you're likely to catch a violation. So just be aware of those risks. Anyhow, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Alex to discuss the camp system. And there will be a period for questions and answers at the end as well, but continue to post your questions and comments in chat. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. And so now the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm going to take you all to camp. My name is Alex Berger. I'm a regulatory and land use attorney at Emerge Law Group. Looks like I know most of you based on the folks who are attending. We are going to talk about CAMP, which is as most of you probably know, the new OLCC online licensing portal system. CAMP stands for Cannabis and Alcohol Management Program. I remember after OLCC had already announced CAMP and they had a cute little logo that was on the bottom of all of their emails, I got a call from somebody at OLCC who was distressed and asked if I was offended by the name CAMP for the program. And apparently that's because there was a 1980s era California Department of Justice initiative called the Campaign Against Marijuana Planting. And so the OLCC was worried that folks who remember California in the 80s might be upset by the camp name. I love the logo so much that I said, no, I am not offended, and please send me a t-shirt. And so hopefully I get a cool camp t-shirt. Um, in any event, camp, as you may recall, was launched on March 18th, 2024. There was a 4-day transition period in which the old system was shut down and camp was not launched yet, where basically all licensing went dark for 4 days. And presumably that was to move all of the information and documentation from the old system to the camp system. But as most of you probably know by now, and as I'm going to go into, virtually no documentation or useful information was transferred from the old system to camp, which is now causing headaches for a bunch of people. When camp was first launched, these online access codes were sent via snail mail and email to licensees so that they could register their own individual accounts. So accounts now go with individuals as opposed to licensees, a single account per licensee. And then the folks would presumably use the online access codes in order to associate any license files that they are the licensees for with their personal account. Um, some of the stated benefits, according to OLCC, of the CAMP program, to provide simple and hassle-free license management with just a single login, to improve data tracking for improved quality of service from OLCC staff, to have access to online payment options using credit, debit, or ACH fund transfer, and to be adaptable and functional on mobile devices. So far, in my experience, only one of those benefits has come to any real fruition, and that is the ability to pay with electronic fund transfer from your account for licensing actions. Um, Unfortunately, at least in my experience, I'm excited to hear about other folks' experience, other attendees. So at the end, I'm hopeful that some folks will raise their hands and let us know about their experiences as well. But my experience and my clients' experience have been the opposite of the stated benefits, to be honest. And it seems like OLCC is going back in time a little bit, which is not great, and which I'll talk about. Um, so going through some of the issues that we've seen our clients experience and that we've experienced: increased assignment delays, for changes of ownership and other what are now called amendments. Last time I checked, the OLCC has a 3-month delay from submittal to assignment. I remember, toward the end of the previous system, it was down to a week or 2 weeks. So, I'm hopeful that once people figure out, uh, once both the industry and OLCC figures out how to use camp properly and maybe make some changes to camp, that will go down, because presumably that's one of the stated purposes. Um, so that's certainly an issue. I mean, I don't think any um, changes of ownership or um, other amendments have been assigned that have been submitted in camp yet, because they're still back at assigning things from the end of January. Um, some other issues, as I mentioned before, at least for all of the clients' accounts, my clients' accounts that I've seen, no documents from the previous portal were transferred over, which makes things like changes of business structure much more difficult. Um, Also, a lot of incorrect contact information somehow got migrated over. So some folks who have not been associated with their licenses for months or years are showing up as primary contacts. Um, So that's not great. And then it doesn't appear that there is a timeline for more simple amendments, adding authorized representatives, changes of trade name, things like that. I've had clients add Emerge Law Group as an authorized representative back in April, and we still have not been added. So also not great. There's also seems to be conflicting information in terms of how to properly add an authorized representative. And anecdotally, I've learned that camp is not as sort of automated as we originally thought it would be or hoped, and that possibly there are only two individual people at OLCC who are reviewing all the amendments that are being submitted for thousands of licenses. And then, as I'll go into a little bit more, it appears that there may be, at least in the short term, an increase in the paperwork that is required to get things done through camp, and possibly an increase in disclosure requirements, which is not desirable for folks.
Hey,
Um,
Alex.
yeah.
Alex, we've got a question in the that was posted in Q&A from Oregon Escrow Services. Um, has the new system been creating delays in license transfers?
Oh, yes. Sorry, that is what I mean by changes of ownership. Um, yes, changes of ownership um, are 3 months behind in terms of assignment to investigators. And then my guess is, I mean, we haven't had one that's been submitted in camp assigned to an investigator yet, but my guess is that there may be even further delays once assigned to investigator based on paperwork that investigators are now asking for. So yes, that is causing a delay in changes of ownership or license transfers, however you want to phrase it.
Okay, and then a follow-up question is it more of clients, I think applicants getting used to the new process, or is it more of a slowdown on the OLCC end?
Um, well, I do not uh, have a lot of insight of what's going on into OLCC, but you know, we have submitted applications on camp. It's not super difficult. You answer the questions that are given. So my guess is that it is OLCC trying to catch up. That's the reason for the delays. Um, so I'm just going to go through a few tips that we've figured out after working through camp for certain things. One is for authorized representatives. Um, the best way to go here is to go old school, I think, and just if you are a licensee who has somebody who has historically managed or you want to help manage your license, just register for camp and then give the authorized representative your login information so they can make changes on your behalf through your own account. And then that person can submit an amendment on your behalf to be added as an authorized rep, and hopefully sooner or later you will be authorized. For authorized representatives who work on a bunch of licenses, it would be useful to just be able to use your own login information to help manage all those licenses. Um, but it seems like that is a difficult process. Originally, we were told that if we were already authorized reps on folks' licenses, we would be emailed our own online access codes. That never happened. And so we've had to pick up the phone and call OLCC and say, hey, we have always been authorized reps. We have submitted amendments. And then at least in one case, I sort of had to sit there and walk through with somebody at OLCC, them approving us on like 10 separate licenses. So again, the most efficient way to do it for now is to just use the licensee's login information, I think. Um, in terms of changes of business structure, as I mentioned before, at least in my experience, it doesn't look like any business structure forms or anything like that have been migrated over, or ownership information be migrated over. So many licensees don't necessarily know what their business structure, what their approved business structure looks like, especially if they have complicated ownership structures. And so one way to help when you want to add somebody or remove somebody from your business structure is to email OLCC and request the latest approved business structure forms that they have on file, and they should be able to get them to you.
Hey, Alex, sorry
Yeah,
to interrupt. I have a
no, no,
question related to this.
sure.
Are you seeing that? So I looked at a client's camp account last night, and I noticed that there was in the camp account there's a screen that shows ownership of the licensee. Are you seeing that screen is accurately reflecting the latest business structure on file, or generally, or is that not reliable?
I'm seeing that screen is blank.
Okay.
That
Helpful.
that there is no information listed in the ownership or interested party page. Um, so that's why we have had to email OLCC to ask for the most recent approved business structure forms. Um, and so one area of concern here is that um, just yesterday we had an investigator reach out to us for one of the changes of business structures that we submitted back in January. And that investigator requested, I don't know if folks remember, folks who are on this webinar remember some of the older forms, but the investigator asked for an LLC, a complete LLC or LLC, excuse me, OLCC LLC questionnaire and a corporate questionnaire, and asked us to fill it out with all owners of the business so that the numbers added up to 100%. Um, so that is something that we have not had to do since 2018, maybe 2019, and OLCC's stated policy, which has not changed to my knowledge, has been to just disclose folks who qualify as applicants. So if OLCC is indeed going to require this for changes of ownership, and I've heard word that for renewals, they are asking for information that these forms request, which include lenders and other folks who do not qualify as applicants under the rules, that this could be problematic for folks and slow things down more and possibly chill investment. So I'm going to work with OLCC and I'm hopeful that we aren't sort of going to go back in time here with some of these outdated requirements. So we'll see, but just be aware that you may be asked for information that you haven't had to disclose in a long time. And so you might want to figure out who all your owners are and what their birth dates are, because that's what's on the form. Um, some tips for dealing with changes of business structure. I mean, I still recommend on the actual camp um, platform of only filling in fields that require a red asterisk. Um, and only disclosing the addition and removal of applicants, because that is what is in OLCC's guidance document that is still on the website. And so as far as I'm concerned, that is still OLCC policy unless further notice is given. And also another reason to just include what is required um, on the actual portal is because once you submit under the rules, if you don't hear back from OLCC within 5 business days, the change is conditionally approved and you can go ahead and from a corporate perspective, make that change, as Michael Jackson would say.
Hey,
Kevin,
Alex.
more? Yeah.
Yeah, we got another question in the chat from Sam Shelley. Um, how do you propose advocating for licensees uh, uh, who uh, who are, I think, I think what you meant to say was who are, having difficulties because OLCC is so far behind. Anything we can suggest, refer to, any legal options?
Hmm. Um, well, I mean, I think coordinating with the trade association, shout out to Mike Getlin again, CIA of Oregon. They have an in with the executive director, other folks at OLCC, um, and I think OLCC knows that this is an issue, and this is a reason why I think we should keep the current keep the current status quo in terms of just uh, disclosing applicants. But at the end of the day, there is nothing that I know of in the rules that require OLCC to take action within a certain period of time once an application has been submitted. Um, so I think the keeping channels open with OLCC. I am certainly advocating on behalf of my clients um, to move things forward as quickly as possible, and I think sort of that's the best you can do. I don't
Um,
know, Kevin, if you think that there
yeah.
are worthwhile litigation options.
Well, I mean, there are litigation options. Whether they're worthwhile is the $1 million question. But there are some tools in Oregon's Administrative Procedures Act that would apply. There is a there is a statute that applies specifically to OLCC and marijuana license applications that says that OLCC can only delay a license application for particular circumstances, and those particular circumstances relate to whether the seller licensee is under an investigation for or subject to a contested case proceeding. Um, which suggests to me that if your license is being, or if your application is being delayed for reasons not related to that, then it is unreasonable per se under the statute. Um, but under the APA generally, there's a provision there's a statute that allows for a court to intervene when an agency generally unreasonably delays acts or refuses to act. But your remedy is limited to getting a court order saying, hey, OLCC, act. um, and um, it may not be effective because if you're suing OLCC in court, they're not going to like it, and the court can't tell them which way to act. So you might get a denial. Um, that's, the way to act. The way they act is under the law is either approve the application or deny it. If they deny it, then you have some contested case hearing rights. Uh, but that's generally not where you want to be. You want to be you want to get it towards approval. So it's probably in most cases it's more cost effective and time effective to jump through the hoops that are laid in front of you um, in order to get to the yes, rather than litigating over a no that will take a while. But again, every situation is different.
Right. Thanks, Kevin. There are also um, ways from a corporate perspective where if we're talking about changes of ownership here or license transfers, where there are ways in which you can add a buyer as an applicant under a change of business structure, so that they can under certain circumstances, go in there and take control. Because again, once you submit a change of business structure, 5 business days, if you don't hear anything from OLCC, you are conditionally approved. So there are ways through services agreements and other sort of corporate wrangling, that you can get in there, that a buyer can get in there and start taking over certain operations before a change of ownership goes through. And there are some other wranglings that you can talk to with your attorneys as well, to effectively speed up the process. Um, just a couple of more things. Let's see, it's already 10 to 12. So for changes of ownership, again, the purchaser needs to register with CAMP, submit a typical application, input the seller's license number, and then again, unfortunately, we've seen OLCC asking for documentation with an initial application that they haven't been asking for previously, that they've only been asking for once the application is assigned, however many weeks later. Those items are Metrc certificate of achievements, so proof that the applicant has taken Metrc training, approved land use compatibility statement, um, proof of legal access, so a signed lease or at least an LOI. And then for retailers only, these tax compliance certificates that have also been, in my experience, quite a headache for the industry. So purchasers should know that they need more paperwork at the outset than they did previously to submit with their change of ownership applications in CAMP. Um, Sometimes placeholders, in my experience, can go through for some of these items, but in other cases, I have heard of folks who have gotten their applications bounced back to them before they have been assigned, if they have not submitted all the required paperwork in the CAMP system. Um, And then a seller must submit a change of ownership or a change of ownership location amendment and will need the buyer's new application file number. And again, for retailers, both the buyer and seller need to submit tax compliance certificates for all applicants before a change of ownership can go through. So everybody needs to be on their toes and get those tax certificates from DOR. Kevin?
So do I understand that correctly then? If you are a retailer who is facing non-renewal because you can't get a tax compliance certificate because you, for example, are uh, behind on filing tax returns personally, um, that you cannot get around that by selling your license.
That is correct. At least that is the policy. I've not encountered that. And there is a temporary rule that's being made permanent, where if you provide certain information and documentation to OLCC, they will extend that requirement. With regard to renewals, changes of ownership, it's unknown, I think. Um, and just a word on tax compliance certificates, because I've had so many clients with so many issues with these. I just have a couple of recommendations for folks who are trying to get tax compliance certificates from the Department of Revenue. Uh, First tip is to use the form. There is a PDF on the OLCC's website. And my recommendation is to use that form, because in that form you can check email for the option to have the approved or denied tax compliance certificate sent back. And that is not an option with the DOR online portal. So I recommend using the form that is on the OLCC website. It's in the frequently asked questions. And you can use that form for both individuals and entity applicants, and then emailing that form to an email address, which I can put in the chat here. This information is not readily available on the website. But I have found that using this form through email gets processed a lot faster, sometimes within a week. And then I just want to offer some resources, some camp resources, which I think Tanansin can go ahead and throw in the chat. These are some resources if you are having issues with camp. OLCC resources. There is a hotline which I found helpful, and an email address and a web page. I am very cautiously optimistic that ultimately, once all of the bugs are fixed and OLCC hopefully takes some of the feedback we're providing, that camp will ultimately be more efficient than the previous system. But for the time being, everything is slower and unfortunately less efficient. And I'm concerned about OLCC asking for more paperwork, and I'm going to push back on that and have been. So if there are any questions, and I'm very curious about people's experience with camp, because my experience is limited to what my clients have needed. And I think if it's okay with you, Kevin, like people can raise their hands and sort of speak up as opposed to, just typing.
Oh, I don't know if people have ability to turn on their mics or not, but
Okay, well, type
there is
away
a
then, everyone,
yeah,
because I'm curious.
there is a question in the chat for you. Do retail licenses that are not operating and seasonally shut down need a tax compliance certificate as well? Or is it only if there's been a transaction to document?
I'm not, okay, so they need a tax compliance certificate or certificates because it's for each applicant, individual and entity, as well as the licensee of record, which is the name on the actual license. Even under those circumstances, to renew the license or to enter into a change of ownership, or to add any new applicants, yes, tax compliance certificates are required.
And every year for renewal, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the tax compliance certificate has to be dated within 90 days of your the expiration date stated on your license.
Yes, for renewal. That's right.
Okay. Any other questions from the attendees?
If anything comes up in the meantime, please feel free to email or call me as well. My information's there.
Yep. Both of our information is on the screen, as well as the link to the camp Q&A from OLCC, and there's no other.
It looks like, Kevin, it looks like there is one question from Domingo, who looks like Domingo's asking about tax compliance certificates for other licenses. Thankfully, during the Rules Advisory Committee process, where I spoke vociferously, as did my other fellow committee members, against requiring tax compliance certificates for other licenses, which was on the table. OLCC thankfully backed away from that. So that is not required currently to transfer or do changes of ownership or add applicants for other license types. So hopefully that will hold for the future, but that's the case currently, certainly. Yes, Jackie, it has been a nightmare.
I would caution though that just because it's not required for other license types now doesn't mean it won't come back or won't be forced upon us in the future. So it's good business practice for everybody in the industry to get your tax returns in order, because you don't want to be in a position of being caught flat-footed.
And rescheduling will help with that. I mean, that's a whole other webinar, but with the eventual hopeful disappearance of 280E, that burden will be removed. A lot of burden.
Comment from Jackie at Can Experts: camp's been a nightmare. Investigators were trained, but when the camp system was launched, none of them knew how to work this program. This has not just affected the license side of things, but also compliance side. That's good to know. Camp compliance side was not supposed to launch until the second phase, but it has been launched, and the inspectors have not been trained. Shocking. This has caused delays everywhere within OLCC. That's I'm not surprised to hear that, unfortunately. Thanks for that information, Jackie. Another question from Christine Robles. I've noticed that the how to report camera outage is done differently. Has anybody used this feature yet?
I have not used the feature yet. I have noticed that there is I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Can Experts folks, but I believe there is an amendment for the notification of camera outage reporting, and then presumably you would just fill in the requested information, which might be, which cameras, when was the outage, and things that were on the previous form. But I can follow up with you on that, Christine, as well.
Another question for you, Alex. It looks like Tone and Zine already shared your contact info. Are you versed in Yamhill County land use, specifically farm use and zoning, not on EFU land?
Yes.
Cool.
Should be able to help with that.
Give Alex a call.
Please.
Another comment from Wendy Minty at Can Experts. Delays regarding every aspect of using camp, packaging and labeling approval, any amendment forms submitted, licensing, obviously, not to mention the challenges with the program functionality in general. And she offers, it looks like she's answering Christine's question, a camera outage is now an amendment in camp. And let's see. So yeah, if there's delays in packaging and labeling approval, that's going to be a problem for everybody that doesn't have a license application. So I hope they work through that quickly.
Yeah, for that, I mean, I think you just would have to email Anthony Galtoski.
Yeah.
At OLCC.
All right. Okay, that looks like and another point from Wendy is essentially everything is just slowed down dramatically as compared to, I don't know what you mean by BC, Wendy. Before camp. Okay. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. So thank you everybody for attending. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Alex or both of us. And our contact information is on the screen right here. But yeah, with that, this this webinar will be recorded and posted, at least on my website, probably on Emerge. I think, you said you've got a YouTube channel for Emerge. It'll be posted there as well. Feel free to send this off to anybody else who wasn't able to attend. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everybody.